Hello and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I have here another set of currently inked pens for this week. I think let's go through these pens just briefly one by one. We'll then go through them in a little bit more detail and then we'll do a writing sample. So from left to right we have the lovely Visconti Corsani 90, which is a stacked celluloid or stacked coin celluloid. We have the Visconti Corsani Octagonal, which was the second version of the Corsani 90. We have the Visconti Wall Street Limited Edition, which was actually the very first version before the Corsani 90 even came out. We have the Montegrappa Extra 1930 Shiny Lines Dove. We have the Scribo Fill in the Verde Bosco. We have a Scribo Fill in the Verde Prato. We have a Visconti Homo Sapiens, and this is the Jade. We have a Visconti Homo Sapiens in the Caput Mundi. We have an Omos Ogiva Cocktail, and this is the Blue Angel. And we have a Retro 51, and this is the Apollo Fountain Pen version. So let's look at these pens in a little bit more detail, shall we? So this, as I said, was the stunning Visconti, and this is the Homo Sapiens, and it's the Corsani 90. But you can see here this beautiful stacked celluloid. You can see why I like this pen a lot. I was really glad that I was able to pick up this pen when I did. This pen is long sold out. There were only 90 versions of this pen available, unfortunately, and they sold out within probably, I think it was about 3 or 4 years. These were pens that were made by Visconti for the retailer Stefano at Stilograph Corsani in Rome, in Italy. But this is a stunning pen. This originally came with a medium nib. I pretty much dedicated this pen to a Diamine ink, which was Diamine Majestic Purple, and it's an ink that I've liked a lot. I was getting a little bit of hard starts on that nib. I have since swapped it out, and I've put a 1.3mm stub in there. You can see there it has my initials on the cap finial there, but it you can have these customized, or you can put a gemstone in, or just the Visconti finial medallion. But this is a beautiful pen. It's a Homo Sapiens, so for me the size of this pen is perfect in my hand. I don't need to post the cap, and as I mentioned, it has a 23 cap palladium nib, and this is a 1.3mm stub nib. But I do love how this pen writes, so I have had that inked up with me all this week. It's a Powervac filler as well, so it's a beautiful pen. It writes exquisitely well. And then I had the second edition of this pen, and this is what is deemed or called the Octagonal, and you'll see here that it really is again another lovely stacked celluloid, but it's actually faceted into an octagonal shape. Again, I have initials on the cap finial there. It's a Powervac filler. I do love this pen a lot, but I don't love it quite as much as the Corsani 90. I think partly because it has a broad nib on there, and it's more of a stubbish broad nib, and I may change that at some point. I think also the pattern isn't quite as vivid as the Corsani 90, and I think probably that the octagonal probably dulls that effect a little bit. But again, it's still a lovely pen, and it's a pen that I do still write with quite a lot, and I have been writing with in this past week. And then, before these came out, there was, of course, the Visconti Wall Street. And this came out in a number of editions. There was the regular edition, and then there was a limited edition. So, this is the limited edition, but as you see here, if I show you, this is 1397 of 4000. So how much limited can you get? I know Montegrappa pulled this one a lot, where they will have a limited edition with 3 or 4 or 5,000. Mont Blanc do it as well. They have some that run up to like 9,000 or so. To be honest, for me, I don't believe that that's a limited edition at that point. It's more of a numbered edition or a special edition. This just has the Visconti cap finial on there. Again, it's a power vac. It has a double reservoir and it has an ink window here. And this also has, the nib's a little bit inky because I just re-inked that. So I think let's try and wipe that off a little bit if I can. There you go, that's much better. But I re-inked this one because it was starting to get a little bit low. But this is a 1.3mm stub nib. So again, like, this is a good size of my hand. I don't need to post the cap. And I really don't prefer posting caps. I try to get away from posting caps if I can. And then we have the Montegrappa, and this is the Extra 1930 Shiny Lines Dove. Aha, but you say it's got 1912 on the cap finial. Well, 1912 was when Montegrappa started and was first founded. But this is the Extra 1930 model, and this is the Shiny Lines Dove. So Montegrappa actually have a number of stacked celluloid versions. This is the Shiny Lines because it's effectively lines going this way. They then have Shiny Circles, which are basically rotating the lines around the barrel. So very similar to these Viscontis. So this is the Shiny Lines version, and this was a Goulet exclusive. It's a silver cap band and trim, so they do start to dull a little bit. I can polish those because they are patinaing, but I choose not to. The reason why I like this pen so much is that the Extra 1930s mostly come with a silver section which patinas, and you do have to polish it up a lot. And this one doesn't. It comes with the stacked celluloid there. So for me, this was a win-win, and I'm really glad that Brian and Rachel at Goulet Pens were able to pull this off with Montegrappa. It's a number 8 size nib, and it's a medium nib with an ebonite feeder, but it just looks stunning. And again, it's actually quite a good size in my hand. It's a little bit shorter than sometimes I would prefer, but for me, it's a good solid writer. And I nearly got that in a broad nib, and I'm actually quite glad that I didn't, and I got it in a medium nib. And then I have the Scribo Fill, and this is the Verde Bosco. And this is a faceted pen. It's a resin pen, so it's not, unfortunately, not celluloid like these 4 pens are. So it is a resin, or acrylic, or plastic, or whatever you want to call it. But it's a beautiful pen. It's a good size pen. It's actually a pen that I love to write with. It's the right size, the right shape, the right weight. It's a piston filling pen, and it has a beautiful 14 karat gold flex nib. And these are the Omas OM81 nibs, and you can probably see how wet that nib is in terms of the slit there between the nib, but it is actually quite a nice pen. So I do love writing with these Scribos. For me, it really comes down to not only the looks on the pen, but how well a pen writes. And the Scribo nibs write super, super well for me. So for me, and prior to that, it was Visconti nibs. And I've had a lot of good Visconti nibs. I've had a few nibs that have not written as well as I would like. I've had to modify them slightly. The Scribo nibs I have not had to modify any of my nibs on. But then again, I have, I think, 4, 5, 6, 7 Scribos, and I have about 60 Viscontis. So maybe if I got up to 60 Scribos, then maybe I might start finding some nib issues. Who knows? But for me, these are really, really good pens. And then we have the Scribo, and this is the Fill, and this is the Verde Prato. And again, this is a beautiful, stunning pen. I really do love this pen. and a friend of mine, good friend of mine, Tony, wanted to get one of these, and he got one as well. But we actually got it from different retailers. I got mine from John at Right Here, and he got his from I think it was Marco at Novelli. But these are really, really stunning pens, and again, it's that hourglass effect going on here. The facets going round the barrel. Again, it's a resin pen. It's not a celluloid, but it's a beautiful pen. And again, that 14 karat gold medium flex nib with the ebonite feed on that pen. So for me, the size, the weight, the length, it's all just clicks for me. I think really Luca at Scribo or Scrittura Bolognese in Bologna in Italy has really hit the nail on the head with this shape and this pen. It's one that I really do like, but I know it's not for everyone. But I do like that ruthenium trim on this lighter colour here. And then we have the Visconti Homo Sapiens Jade. And this was a pen that I wasn't sure if I was going to pick up. It comes with a jade gemstone there in the cap finial. This I picked up because I had the Caput Mundi, which is this one here. And this, I wasn't really that up on this colour of green, to be honest. I much prefer the darker green or this lighter green, and not this kind of washed out green. It's probably what I would call it, possibly more of a jade colour. But for me, this really was just not the colour that I liked, but it was a Homo Sapiens, and I love Homo Sapiens, so I decided I would pick this up, and I'm glad I did, because these are becoming more and more difficult to get hold of nowadays. It's a demonstrator. It holds around 2.5 millilitres of ink. It's a 23 karat palladium medium nib, and I really wanted a different size nib on there, but I could only get a medium nib. And to be honest, I'm actually glad. It's strange, but I'm actually glad now that I did get a medium nib on there, because I actually write with it a lot more than I probably would have done if I think at the time I wanted I think it was a broad or a stub nib on there. I think it might have been more of a stub nib, and I said I'd go for a broad nib if I could, but I'm glad I didn't. And then we have the lovely Visconti Homo Sapiens Caput Mundi, and this is a really, really lovely pen. I've got my initials on here as well, so I've had those swapped out. Again, it's a Powervac filler, holds 2.5 millilitres of ink. It's just like the Jade. It's got a bronze trim to it, and the nib here is a 23 karat palladium medium nib, but again, it's a nib that writes really well, and to be honest, this one writes very bouncy, very flexy. This 23 karat palladium nib, it's a beautiful nib. Some of the nibs are not as bouncy or flexible. This one is fairly flexible, so again, it's a nib that I do love writing with a lot. So I have that pen inked up this week. And then a pen I haven't had inked up for a very long time is this Omas Ogiva Cocktail, and it's the Blue Angel. And again, it's faceted, but it's very light, sort of almost like a Guilloche type sort of facet going on there. It's a smaller pen. It's a piston pen. You might be able to see sort of my finger moving behind that. But the ink is literally only filled up to about here, and then the rest is the piston mechanism. And this is typically what you find on most piston filling pens. So a lot of piston pens will only fill around about a milliliter of ink, which isn't a lot more than a 0.6, 0.7 milliliter cartridge converter pen. And that's typically why for long writing sessions I prefer these like Visconti Homo Sapiens, the Powervacs, because they can hold up to 2.5 milliliters of ink. So they really, really can hold a lot more ink. But for me, I do love this pen. So this was a pen that I actually managed to get off of a friend. He was looking to sell it. And the reason why I like this, and the reason why he was getting rid of it, was it was an Omas pen that he bought online, and it is an Omas, but it has what they call a 52 degree nib. What's a 52-degree nib? Well, it's basically how that tipping is shaped. So it basically makes it like a double broad nib. So it's a very, very wet paintbrush. And I sometimes like these types of pens. So in the size of my hand, it's actually a good size, it's a good weight, and it just feels right. But I do love how it writes. Now, I can't write with this a lot. I can't write sort of in a notebook with it because it will just go through and seep through to the other side of the page, and it is like writing with a marker, and you'll see that in the writing sample. But it's a pen that I do like to pick up now and again and write with. And then we have, last but not least, this pen, and you may have seen a version of this pen, and this pen is the Retro 51 pen, and it's the Apollo Space Race pen. So the reason I got this pen, now I already have another one of these, and I actually have the rollable version. And I wasn't going to get the fountain pen. I really wanted the fountain pen, but I decided I would then get the Apollo set because I couldn't just get two of the three. And then a UK retailer and a friend at our pen club, Jackie, had put me on to that a UK retailer has now got these in stock. So we decided to do a group buy, and I bought this along with another rollable, another space version, which you'll probably see at some point reviewed on my channel. But this is a beautiful Apollo space one. It has a Yovo nib. It's a fine nib. I would prefer a broad nib. It's stamped 51 for Retro 51. It's a steel nib. It writes okay. To be honest, I prefer the broad nibs of Yovo, or at the very least a medium nib. I might swap this out at some point, although to be honest, I am kind of liking the fine nib. I might have to tune it a little bit because although the nib writes really well, I find if I'm doing upstrokes like that, it can be a little bit on the scratchy side. So I just need to check the alignment of the nib there, and that's something that I can fix myself, and I will do that. I won't be sending it back. This is just something that I will do. I can make nib adjustments, and I will do if necessary. So that might be something that I will do, but it's a lovely pen. The section though, for me, is a little bit on the narrow side. I prefer thicker sections. So for me, it's starting to get a little bit too narrow, but it's a pen that I really wanted, so I decided that I would buy it, and because I bought it sort of recently, it's a pen that I've also had inked up, and I've had inked up this week. So that's my currently inked pens for this week. I think let's go and do a writing sample now. So the first pen here is the lovely Visconti stacked celluloid. So we'll do an ink swatch first, and you'll find that this is a super wet pen, and this is why I love this nib. It is very, very wet. So this is the Visconti, and I'm just going to abbreviate it. It's Homo sapiens, and it's the Corsani 90. And it is a 1.3mm stub nib, and it's a 23 cat palladium nib. And then the ink in here is one of my, if not the favourite purple ink, Diamine Majestic Purple. And for me, this is a beautiful ink. I love the dark sort of ink colour, or dark purple I get out of that ink. And then we have the next pen, and this is again another Visconti, and you'll see here it's a broad nib, and so it's a Visconti, and it's a Homo sapiens, and it is the Corsani, and it's the octagonal And I'm going to write it with a 90 because that's how it's spelled. So octagonal. Octagonal. And it's a broad. And it's a 23 carat. I'm going to abbreviate this a bit so it will fit. And the ink in here is the lovely Pelican Edelstein Topaz. Beautiful ink. And it's a lovely sort of turquoisey colour ink. Then we have the Visconti Wall Street. So we'll do an ink swatch, and again, this is a super wet nib. You can just see how wet this is. It's a paintbrush. So you have to be very careful on which paper that you write on with this. This is Oxford Optic paper. I'll get it right. But this is a paper that is very, very fountain pen friendly, and also actually provides a little bit of sheen as well. A little bit like Tomoe River, but not quite as much. So this is the Visconti, and it's the Wall Street LE. And it is a stub nib, 1.3mm stub nib with tipping, and it's a 23 carat palladium nib. And then the ink in here is the lovely Diamine Aqua Lagoon. But that is a lovely ink, one of my earlier inks. And I don't write with it a lot, but it's an ink that I do keep going back to. And then we have the Monte Grappa. So we'll do an ink swatch here. And you'll see again, this is quite a wet nib. So again, I love writing with wet nibs. So this is a Monte Grappa. And it's the extra 1930 shiny lines Dove, and it's a medium, and it's an 18 carat gold nib. I'm just going to do a G there. And then the ink in this pen today is Diamine Earl Grey, which tends to be a little bit more on the darker side in this pen than it is in other pens. It just really depends on the pen that you put it in. And then we have the lovely Scribo. So we'll do an ink swatch here. And again, this is quite a wet nib. So it's the Scribo Fill, and it's the Verde Bosco, and it's a medium 14 karat gold flex nib. And then the ink in here is Ackerman Bezurden Woods Grown. And again, that's one of my favourite green inks. And then I have another favourite ink, which is an ink that is really coming up quite nicely in my collection as one of my favourite inks. We'll do an ink swatch here, you'll see. Now, this is a wet nib again. The ink isn't as wet, but I guess it's still quite wet. It's a fast-drying ink, at least I would say. I would classify it as a fast-drying ink. So this is a Scribo Fill, and again it's the Verde, but this time it's the Prato. And it's a medium 14 karat gold nib. But the ink in here is a beautiful ink, and it's Pilot Iroshizuku, and the ink here is beautiful Chiku Rin. And that for me is a lovely, lovely sort of green ink. Now we have a Visconti Homo sapiens Jade, and I normally have this inked up with a different ink, but because I came back from the Pelican Hub at the end of September, I also had a number of new Pelican Edelstein inks. So I decided to ink this up with one of those. Now this is a medium nib, and it's not as wet writing, and I'd say this ink probably isn't quite as wet as some of my other inks are. So this is the Visconti Homo sapiens Jade, and it is a medium, and it's a 23 carat palladium nib. And then the ink in here is, I wonder if you can guess this, it's Pelican Edelstein. Now Pelican and the Edelstein range have a number of different inks. This is Jade, but it's actually quite a nice colour ink. Slightly different though to the pen colour, but this is what you get sometimes. But I thought I would give that a try in that pen. And then we have the this is the lovely Visconti Homo sapiens Caput Mundi. And again, I decided I normally actually stick to one of two inks in here, and I decided it's either normally Ackerman, Dutch Masters, Steenrud van Vermeer, I think, or Pelican Edelstein Ruby. But I decided to put a different ink in here this week, and I'm actually really liking this ink. So again, this is an ink that I came back with from the Pelican Hub. So this is the Visconti Homo sapiens, and it's the Caput Mundi, but I'm really loving this red. It's quite a vibrant red. It's a medium 23 carat palladium nib, and the ink in here, see if you can guess this one. Pelican, I've already told you it's an Edelstein ink, and strangely enough, it's a lot lighter than I thought it would be. It's garnet. And I thought, looking online, that garnet was actually quite a dark red ink. But for me, or certainly in this pen, it's actually quite a vibrant red. So that's a red that I'm starting to love a lot. Now, I mentioned about this pen and that it has an interesting nib, and it's a 52 or a 52 degree nib. So it's quite a wet nib, and I'm going to show you just how wet and how broad this nib is. And this is why I love this nib a lot. So it's an Omas, and it's the Omas Ogiva Cocktail. You can see how broad this nib is. It's a blue Angel, and it's a 52 degree nib, and it's an 18 carat gold nib, but it's a very, very broad nib. And if I wanted to do a reverse, I can actually get much finer line there, which is more like a fine nib, I would say, bordering on an extra fine nib. The ink in here was again another Pelican ink that I've been trying, which is Pelican Edelstein, and it's Sapphire. But that is a beautiful ink, and I think it actually matches with the pen combination quite a lot there, to be honest. And then the ink of the year from Pelican is inked up in this pen. So this is the Retro 51 Apollo. So this is a fine nib, so it's going to be a much, much, much finer nib than most of these other nibs. But you can see here it's still quite a good writer. So this is the Retro 51, and it's the Apollo version of the fountain pen. I'm going to write fountain pen because most of theirs are normally rollables. It's a fine and it's a steel nib. It's a Yovo nib. And then the ink in here is the Pelikan Edelstein Ink of the Year 2019, and it's Star Ruby. And that's actually quite a lovely pink ink. It's a little bit more of a reddish pink ink, I would say, but still, I like that ink a lot at the moment. So I think let's just go through these pens inked up one more time. We have a Visconti Homo Sapiens Corsani 90 with a 1.3mm stub nib. It's a 23 cat palladium nib, inked up with Diamine Majestic Purple. We have a Visconti Homo Sapiens Corsani Octagonal with a broad 23 cat palladium nib, inked up with Pelikan Edelstein Topaz. We have a Visconti Wall Street limited edition with a 1.3mm stub, 23 cat palladium nib, inked up with Diamine Aqua Lagoon. We have a Monte Grappa Extra 1930 Shiny Lines Dove in a medium 18 cat gold nib, inked up with Diamine Earl Grey. We have a Scribo Fill in the Verde Bosco in a medium 14 cat gold nib, inked up with Akamon Bazoodan Woodgrown. We have a Scribo Fill Verde Prato with a medium 14 cat gold flex nib, inked up with Pilot Orochizuku Chikurin. We have a Visconti Homo Sapiens Jade in a medium 23 cat palladium nib, inked up with Pelikan Edelstein Jade. We have a Visconti Homo Sapiens Caput Mundi in a medium 23 cat palladium nib, inked up with Pelikan Edelstein Garnet. We have a very broad Omos Ogiva Cocktail Blue Angel in the 52 degree nib, and it's an 18 karat gold nib, inked up with Pelikan Edelstein Sapphire. And last but not least, we have the Retro 51 Apollo fountain pen in a fine steel nib, inked up with Pelikan Edelstein Ink of the Year 2019 Star Ruby. So there you have it. That's my currently inked pens for this week. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.